And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Larry English. He's the president and co-founder of Centric Consulting, which is a management consulting firm that guides you in the search for answers to complex digital, business, and technology problems. Prior to Centric, he worked at a large international consulting firm, and as is typical, got burned out by 25. So today, Centric is a 1,000 person plus company with locations in 12 cities and in India. Larry's the dad to 4 boys and a husband to an adventurous wife, and he resides in glorious Columbus, Ohio. So here we go. Kind of ended on a low note with Columbus. We got to frame that differently. Anyway.
We like to keep it a secret. We're very happy.
I know, exactly. So anyway, here we go. So you fit into the category of, I doubt when you introduce yourself to clients or colleagues or whatever, you introduce yourself as Larry the author, right? You're known as the CEO and founder of Centric, but now we've added the Larry the author hat. So how does that, first let's start with why you chose to write the book and how that's sort of aligned with the business goals, where it's a little bit different, and how you're sort of managing that, sometimes a little bit of attention, but just sort of that pull.
Yeah. So the reason I decided to write the book there are a couple reasons. One is we've been a remote company for 20 years, and we've won a lot of awards for our culture. And I kept having to explain it over and over to executives. They're like, that doesn't compute for me. I don't understand how that works. And we could start to see the technology was getting better. Clients were starting to be more accepting, and we saw it as the future of work. And so we knew that this was going to be a trend that was going to eventually take off. And so I was trying to get ahead of that trend a little bit. And then the pandemic happened. And then all of a sudden, everybody wanted to know, oh my gosh.
So are you actually sponsoring COVID? Because it sounds like you should be.
I was accused of being in Wuhan this fall.
We won't touch that. There you go. Right.
Exactly. So obviously you saw 10, 20 years accelerate into 3 months. And and all the things that I kept telling people, like, no, this is a better way to work. You can trust your employees are going to be happier. You can get just as much work done. You can have as good of a culture. They're seeing that and they're like, oh, wow, this is amazing. I'd like to, this is working. I see the advantages. I would like to permanently adopt this. And so we've been helping a number of companies figure out how to do that. So
let me ask you then, so prior to this, so you've always been a work remote organization. That was a differentiator, right? And then if it came up in conversation, et cetera, but your business wasn't you weren't in the business of teaching mid-sized consulting firms how to work remotely. It's a capability, oh, by the way, you just happen to have, right? Has it now turned into a line of business, or how does it support the business?
Yeah, so we have a people and change practice that we've had for a long time. And when this started to happen, and because I had published the book, people were like, oh, you guys know what you're doing. Please help us. And so we've actually translated that into a service offering. And we've been, so as you know, there's a technology component to, working remote, and then there's the change. And the people and change part is usually the hardest. And it's usually 2/3 of the work. And so we're doing both of those. We're helping companies implement Teams as an example. So the technology piece, and then we're helping them because you just can't turn on Teams and all of a sudden have a great culture and a great remote workforce. It is really
stay there for a minute, because I think if you go back to the beginning of the pandemic, first nobody volunteered. This is okay. Congrats. There is no more office. You're working from home.
Right.
So that first, I don't know exactly, let's call it 6 or 8 weeks. Most of the concern, the stress, the frustration from people outside of COVID, not to discount that, was the technology. Oh, geez, do I have enough Wi-Fi? Oh, geez, do I have, whatever. A lot of, and ultimately, I think you could sort of checklist most of that stuff. Okay, so in order to work from home, check this with your provider, do this. We recommend this software, this tool, whatever. But if you've never done it before, it's incredibly irritating and frustrating and compounded with everything else. Now, I think, and this is what you alluded to, the real issue isn't, teaching someone the etiquette of Zoom or, whatever, but how do I maintain my culture? How do I maintain productivity? There's this whole new things that are basically old business problems given to us in a new form. And that seems to be where your years of experience, not as a consulting company that does this, but a company that lives this came to be.
Yeah, so it's kind of gone in waves, as you just said. And so the second wave of what people are starting to realize is their employees are becoming quickly disconnected. And the reason is because all the things that you have to do to stay connected and have a great virtual culture are all around people. And we've figured that out, and we've built that training. So we train our leaders on it. We measure it. We've built it into how we operate the business. And so companies are running into all of those things, and we're like, hey, we figured this out. Let us help you on how to do that.
Interesting. So it's sort of interesting now that you have grown that line of your business to help people do that, which probably started as a cost center, right? It was just a way for you to teach your people how to function.
That's exactly right. And so it's been serendipitous. I don't see it going away. So it's fascinating. I don't know if you've seen out in Silicon Valley this week. You saw, Pinterest paid $95 million to get out of their contract for their new building. You saw REI sell their brand new corporate headquarters. And so we actually put together what we call a community of interest. And we're bringing a lot of these companies together and kind of all sharing confidentially, hey, this is the journey that we're on and this is what we're struggling with. Let's help each other out. So it's been great.
Well, and it's interesting because a lot of these issues typically lived in HR, and HR is good. I'll agitate some HR folks unintentionally or not, but HR is really good at telling us what not to do. Don't do this. You can't do this. You don't do, whatever. Not necessarily as good as adapting, being on the cutting edge, being creative, experimenting, because what we've always done has always worked. So I was talking to the head of HR at a fairly large company last week, and it's like, wow, this whole world of best practices doesn't work for us anymore because we've just had to hire X amount of people and onboard them without ever meeting them. It was like, ooh, that would have been sort of a theoretical problem, back in January. That's a real problem now. Like, so how do you, new problems are bubbling up.
Yeah, and what we're seeing, it is falling on the CHRO. They are getting tasked with figuring this out and kind of in conjunction with the CIO, but definitely it is falling to the CHRO. And we've been pleasantly surprised because what's interesting is they're the ones that are doing pulse surveys of their employees. The surveys are coming back overwhelming. I love working from home. I'm not coming back into the office. And if you make me, I'm going to go get another job with somebody that will let me. And so the CHRs are like, we're going to have to do this. We've got to address this. This is going to be a big issue.
That's crazy. And well, think about how many companies, one of their at least perceived competitive advantages, ooh, we've got the cool office. Ooh, we've got great food. Ooh, look, we're in the cool part of town, or, we're in the Mission if we're in San Francisco, or Chelsea if we're in New York, or whatever. Now it's like the best part of town is sort of down the hall from my bedroom right now. It's hard to compete with that,
Yeah, and we're actually seeing, I don't know if you've seen this, but in New York, I think you're in New York or Long Island.
Yeah, I'm in New York. Yeah, yep.
We're seeing the occupancy rates go,
it's frightening.
It's pretty crazy, but it is transforming how things are done. So you're seeing, people move away from the big cities. You're seeing HR now having to deal with, okay, do I pay this guy the same amount if he's living in Columbus, Ohio, when he was living in New York? No, probably not. How do we handle that? It's having an incredible, but the cool side of things are, oh my gosh, all this talent. When I thought I just they had to be in New York City for me to be on the team, they can be anywhere now. And so it's going to transform how companies operate for the better.
Yeah. And when I think different, I don't say generations, but different people in different situations are experiencing it differently. So again, this conversation I had with the head of HR at this company a couple of weeks ago was saying, okay, so now what's, again, HR can tell you what not to do. Don't ask Larry about his religious beliefs or his practices or whatever. But now if I'm going to hire you and you've never met, I might say to you, Larry, could you walk me around on FaceTime on your workspace to see if this looks, like what it looks like because you're representing the company? How much bandwidth do you have? Who else lives in the household? And do they where's that line? And I don't know what right or wrong is in this domain. Where is that line between, no, I have a right and it's actually an appropriate question versus, if I were to hire you a year ago and say, hey, Larry, turn on FaceTime and walk me around your house. You're like, okay, peeping Comville. That's clearly in the ick bucket. We don't do that,
Well, it's really interesting that you're bringing this up, because what we found is the secret to a great remote culture is building deep personal relationships with everybody that you're working with. And so it's modeling vulnerability, being vulnerable. It's talking about those, your dogs and your cats and your family relationships. And because when you feel closer, you have a greater sense of trust. And so I don't know we've never had an issue with that from an HR perspective, but we know that we have to do that in order to be successful and stay connected as a remote culture.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. Right, but let me take the New York issue as an example. It is quite common in New York for young folks first starting in their career, let's say single, 30 and under, to live with 1, 2, 3 roommates, right? And when they went into that situation, it was assumed everybody's out of the house at 7:30 and comes back at 7:30. We're not all here all day. It's not really optimized for 3 people to, maybe one needs quiet time and one needs, whatever. So now you have to rethink who you live with, how you live, the hardware of the place. Can 2 people be on a call at once? I think it's a game changer. And more importantly, do I need to be paying $5,000 a month rent where I can go 2 hours away as long as I have a good connection? Who cares?
We've talked about, we're seeing what we're calling the era of the individual, because they have all this immense flexibility now of where they can live, how they work, who they work for, and how they manage their day, how they time slice their day. And a lot of them aren't equipped to do it. And so we're actually developing training so these companies can actually train people to be great remote workers and learn how to do that.
Well, and I think that freedom scares a lot of folks, because it was fairly easy when the routine was I got to my desk at 8:30 and I got my cup of coffee and I sat down, and then I do that and I do that, whatever. Now it's like, well, what if I want to jump on the Peloton at 11? Is that a bad thing? No, who cares, right? Now, you might get up a half hour earlier and do emails, or after dinner do that. Like, whatever, I have to be able to trust you and say, Larry, you're an adult. You got to do what you got to do and get it done. And you know what? There might be days where you can't do that Peloton thing because there's a fire to pull out. But I kind of don't care. And you know what? If that makes you happy, great. I think a lot of folks have also realized, they got the gift of the commute time back. I don't know anyone that said, golly gee, I can't wait to go sit in my car for an hour and a half a day and listen to the radio. And there's the productivity tax that one pays for being in an office environment of, the ritual, I meet you at the coffee machine and you and I chit chat for a little bit. And then, what are you doing for lunch? I don't know, I'll get back to you, whatever. And then it's always Sheila's in accounting's birthday. It seems like every week.
Yeah, it's interesting. So there were a lot of studies right after, let's say 2 or 3 months in, and everybody's productivity shot way up. And I'm like, you know what? Don't count on that to stay, because
not to sustain. Yeah.
People are stuck at home. They're working. What happens when people make the transition to work for remote for the first time? They
overdo it, probably.
You got it right. And so you actually have to train them on how to do that. So you're hitting on all of those things that we've encountered. Yeah,
really. So if you were to give some thought or advice to someone in a similar situation that you're in now. So this book would have happened with or without COVID. It was happening. And you wanted to write the story, which is a unique story about your company, of how it works remotely. And that probably would have been a nice thing for the company. Like, hey, our CEO wrote a book and it's sort of interesting. And, maybe the sales folks will give it to a potential client. But it wouldn't have been, I don't know, a game changer. It would have been a nice thing.
Right.
And, yeah.
It would have sold 10 copies.
Right. Maybe 11. Right. But it would have been like, and Larry, and you would have felt good. Like, hey, I wrote a book about our culture, and maybe it's part of the onboarding, but it would have been like not the highest priority, not a game changer, not a whatever. So what would you say to anyone out there and say, take stock of what you're doing that might be of value to others, and forget COVID for a moment. What is it that's unique, that's special about you, your company, your experience, your enterprise that might be interesting to others? And it doesn't have to be a book. Maybe start getting out some thought leadership, blogs, videos, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so absolutely. So the reason one of the reasons that you opened this with, that I started to write the book, is because we knew to survive as an organization, we had to be great at thought leadership. And so we've been trying to do that. And so I said, okay, great. I'll be the guinea pig because I think this is a topic that is going to be important. And I'll start to figure out how we do thought leadership. And we've actually developed, I think you knew that we've developed an internal program and we've put 3 or 4 people through it. So the lessons learned that we've learned from that and the business that we've gotten, it's extra special that, just it happened with with Office Optional and what happened, it just blew up. But even if it hadn't, there would have been benefit out of that because we're on a long-term journey to be great at thought leadership across our entire organization. And so we would have gotten a benefit.
So let's stay on that for a minute. So there's one piece of the thought leadership at Centric that you owned on the book, right? And as the founder, so you got to own that. But I know, because I've talked to several really wonderful folks at your company, there's also different pieces of thought leadership that are more closely connected to what you do in your business and your clients and whatever that you don't own per se. So how did you decide that thought leadership is a worthwhile investment for others in your company to spend a significant portion of their time on? And then how do you KPI that? That's the tough part.
So there's multiple things in there. We recognize that you're going to end up commoditized if you are not constantly on the leading edge.
1,000%. Yeah.
And so if you're doing that, you're naturally going to get there anyway. So why not take the little bit extra step and build the methodology and the infrastructure to allow those people to get their voice out there? And it has been amazing to me. So, taking Office Optional, we are in and getting into clients that they would have never talked to us. And so, this is a very unique piece, and it's put us out there as thought leader and gives us a platform for this other stuff. Now, how do I measure that? How are we going to measure the KPIs across our company? I would say we're at the nascent stage, so I'd welcome any advice that you have. Okay. But ultimately, I think it's going to be hard because you'd want it to be translated into sales, as an example.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty hard to do, and I think you can do a little bit. It's one of those. There's a few things when you do a strategy that you just know you have to do, and you're not going to. There's not going to be a tangible ROI, but I'm still going to invest. I'm going to do that, and I kind of feel like this is a little bit one of those. And you got to figure out
let's play with that a little bit. So it depends how we measure it. So one argument could be, wait a minute, you didn't even know you had half a dozen talented people inside of the company that could develop and deploy thought leadership, and it's and they want to. So one measurement could be talent attraction and retention, maybe, right? That's a piece of it. If they had that thing burning in them and they didn't get that satisfied there, they might have gone somewhere else, right? The other thing could be, as you say, sales is sort of easy to measure. How do I differentiate? I mean, I think we're all fighting this commoditization wave. I don't care what business you're in. I don't care what industry you're in. You're getting commoditized. So is it a cost-effective tiebreaker to stand out from your competitors to show that you're just a little bit more interesting, a little bit smarter, have a voice in the ground versus not? Because having thought leadership versus not means I have a perspective and point of view versus not. Wouldn't you want to deal with someone that does?
And so 2 things. The examples I would give is we just recently hired a guy that is really respected as a technologist. People are going to come to our company because of it.
Right.
It's been amazing. And then we sold a deal, and I was talking to the buyer. And I'm like, why did you pick us? And they're like, you put out so much great thought content compared to your competitors. It's clear that you guys, you know what you're doing. So to your point earlier, I can't measure. I don't know how to measure that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that people do it: weighted averages, or contribution, or there's a point system for a download of a white paper versus bringing the creator into a meeting as part of the. I mean, none of them are what I would call sort of a hard and true measurement. I think you have to experiment and trust your gut a little bit and realize, like you said, it's there, and err on the side of giving it a little bit more credit than you could probably see, because I think there is some sort of invisible, I won't say invisible, but immeasurable, if you will, benefits.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Well, this has been awesome. Any other, your friends and family now treating you as you're so much smarter that you're a published author? It's usually, I usually think it's about a 30-point IQ bump that people get.
Well, I'll tell you, my partner, when I was writing the book before this, he's like, this is the dumbest thing you've ever done. And then after COVID hit, he's like, that is so smart, Larry. You did an amazing job.
Wow. So
But what
you went from a dummy to a genius in 222 pages. That's
is
fantastic.
exactly. And then the other thing is my wife is just grumpy that because all I didn't realize when I was writing this, somebody's like, hey, the amount of time that you put into writing that, the same amount as to promote it. And I'm like, oh, no, I don't believe you. Oh, yeah, that's really true. And so it is a ton and ton of work. And I think my wife's like, okay, enough.
All right, we could, if you'd like, edit out "my wife is just grumpy" because that could be the tag for this. That could be the quote we accidentally pull, and that probably wouldn't work for you. But
It's perfectly fine.
okay,
She would own it.
okay, and it wasn't a pre-existing condition. You're owning. You're the cause of that. Just want to make sure. I want to clarify. Cool. All right. Well, this has been great. I appreciate your time and best of luck with it. It's very cool, and it's just sort of weird how COVID accelerated the adoption and all that. So, we're always looking. Everybody's, I think, not obsessed, but always thinking about who's losing with COVID, and there's some unintended positive outcomes, which I guess is good.
Well, everybody's got to do business digitally now, and so
Yeah.
we're hiring people. I mean, it's been good for us. I know a lot of
Great.
people are hurting, but we're grateful that it's been so good for us.
Great. Thanks for your time. Enjoy your day, Larry. Thanks. Bye.
Right, bye.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.